Welcome to the Hedgineer podcast with your hosts, Michael Watson and Jhanvi.
And welcome back to another episode of the Hedgineer podcast, where we go over technology, data, and AI and asset managers and hedge funds. And I am your co-host, Michael Watson.
And I am your other co-host, Jhanvi.
Jhanvi. So as we always started off, what's new in the world of AI?
Yeah, I was actually getting dinner with one of my friends last night, and I was talking to her about how I feel like this role transforms so drastically. Like every 6 months, we're focusing on something that's very different and distinct. Like 6 months ago, like we were spending a lot of time figuring out how to build a really good recruiting pipeline. And we spend a lot of time talking about like HR related things and sales related things. 6 months before that, we were figuring out product management and engineering and how to build a process around that and actually start like building software in a very consistent way. Now, this week has been really interesting for both of us because we very distinctly and intentionally started spending a lot of time on marketing, specifically when it comes to like building video content for our social media channels, for potentially even sharing with sales call like clients. And so I think that would be a really interesting thing to talk about because I think that we've learned a lot this week just doing this thing for the first time.
Yeah, and it was kind of crazy how quickly we were able to generate like very high quality world-class content.
Yeah.
And we now have like a process where we have like, we can one shot a video, build a storyboard, generate all the underlying assets, stitch it together, review it. You and I can share it in one repo. And it took like a couple days to get a process around it. But I think the process that we have it's kick ass. Like I'm blown away. It's some of like the most blown away I've been with AI since I started like on this journey. And we should talk about it for sure.
Yeah. And like to set the scene, like our engineers have been doing really amazing work and building these very great AI products that we want to start sharing to everyone, right? And so the end of next week or the end of last week, we were talking and we actually pinged Aaron, our podcast producer, and sent him a couple of marketing campaigns that we've seen from similar like enterprise AI companies. It was like, I sent him one from Rogo, one from Harvey, one from Hebbia, and like they all look so similar. Mm-hmm. It's like the same kind of vibe with like the upbeat music in the background, text animation kind of coming in and out, these floating animations of the actual platform or pieces of the UI. And like telling a story of like new things. And so we pinged Aaron, we're like, hey, like how are people generating these videos? How are people creating these videos? Because they're all so similar that like there has to be some process that's very consistent that we could probably piggyback off of and learn. And so he sent us some links for some software. And then at the same time, you started kind of independently iterating with a couple of different tools that you discovered and ended up coming up with something that I think is so interesting and fresh and different when it comes to like how traditional companies like us share content. So maybe we just start with like, how did you go about doing that?
Yeah. So I think even before we do that, let's just roll a clip of one of the videos that we put together. We have a series of 6 of them using the same style, same thematics. It goes over some of the products we're rolling out from the skill library, agent directory, functions, observability, Hedgineer Academy for training, and then does a full overview of the platform. But let's do like a quick run of the reel, and then let's kind of talk about how we created it.
Yeah, and we're still iterating on it, so this might not be the actual version that ends up on our socials, so our listeners are getting a sneak peek.
Cool.
This is a story about what your firm knows. Every firm has someone who just knows how things get done. They write instructions and nuances in a skill, so their AI knows it too. But how can they share it so their team members can do the same? They're emailing files back and forth, helping colleagues get it set up, until the burden becomes too much to bear. What skills need is a home that handles building, sharing, and editing in a simple, intuitive way. One warm, well-lit home for everything your firm knows. Every agent in every model provider draws from the same shelf. Every skill is accessible to a defined scope. You, your team, or the whole firm. When you notice your AI misusing a skill, you can instruct it to improve the skill so the same mistake doesn't happen again. Review and approve the change so everyone on the team now has the new and improved version. Give a skill a function and it runs real code, reliably, anywhere. And you can watch it all work. An army of AI agents working for you, backed by the very best your firm knows. The Skill Library, powered by Hedgineer.
So it's not bad, right? Like, I think that's pretty decent.
I think it's pretty great.
Yeah. So, okay. So how we went about creating it is, one, heavy lean into Fable, not for the purposes of generating any of the audio or the video associated to it. And if you're not on YouTube or LinkedIn and you're just doing it over the podcast, I encourage you to head over to the YouTube site and you can view the visuals. But leaning heavily into Fable for acting as the harness and thinking through all of the reasoning to put together these videos. And so what we start with is generating a storyboard. So what is I will give a big prompt, what's the product capabilities, what are the frustrations that our users have, what's the general theme, and then Fable will construct that into a storyboard of maybe like 6, let's say between 12 and 16 different shots in this different sections. And then it will, for each one of those shots, take a generalized theme, it'll go to Gemini 3 and create the theme asset. So like it'll create some SVGs of reusable characters that we want to use. I already articulate that early on. It generates a color scheme. It generates the general voiceover theme and like the emotions that we want to evoke. It then starts generating content for each one of the sections. And so for that, originally I was using Gemini VO for generating the videos, but I was only on the first tier and I can only generate 10 a day. Each one of these videos is generating maybe 12 to 15 different short form videos per iteration. So like I need to generate a lot more, like 4 to 8 second clips. So then I switched over to runway.dev, and that's basically an open router, but for generative video, generative audio. And so I can just use runway.dev, and that can route to VO. It also routes to Kling, and it routes to Seedance. And so what I ended up actually using more than VO was Seedance 2.0 and also Kling 3.0. And so Fable writes the prompts, like, hey, in this section, we're talking about the Hedgineer skill library. In the Hedgineer skill library, we allow users to be able to write skills, share them with their team, be able to monitor how they're using skills across the company. And so let's thematically use a library that you can pull books off the shelf, treat it as a skill, update the skill, put it back on the shelf, have another agent pull a skill down. And so that's a theme that we have within this video. Fable will then write the prompt that's passed to Seedance to generate that video, as well as an SVG to keep like the general theme aligned. And then Seedance is going to go generate the video and send it back. And then Fable is kind of orchestrating all these different sections. It then will go and generate the voiceover. So first it has to generate what is the actual text that we're going to narrate the video with.
So before you get to the next part,
yeah,
when actually building that narrative, like how much of that was you being very intentional in passing like taste, tone, purpose to the prompt? Obviously, you explained what the product was, right? There's no way for Fable to know that. But like, how much of this was Fable reasoning and building something that actually tells a cohesive story? And how much was it you writing it out?
A lot of it was like the thematic elements. It was Fable. Like the library. I use the term skill library because that's the name of the product, but I didn't say we should actually have a visual bookshelf that represents the library and pulling skills on and off it.
Oh, you didn't do that.
No, like that was Fable coming up with that concept based off of what I wrote down. Now I did spend probably let's say like 30 to 45 minutes articulating the product, articulating the problem statement that our clients had, giving examples of like what the product actually does on our end, giving some prompts around I want it to be like a whimsical video that is for technical users, but explains it in a very like fun and delightful way, something like that. Like, I mean, I'm not a creative in that context. But then a lot of these visual elements, Fable actually like reasoned through the creation of it. And then I'm like, yeah, that's fire. There were some things that it would do, and I don't like that. So there's some element of survivor bias where what exists now, a lot of it was created by Fable, but there's a lot of things that are also created that I said nuke that.
Yeah.
But then let's keep going. So we're using Fable as the model harness, and I'm just now using Fable from Claude Code on web. And the benefit of that is I could go from my phone, I could go from my laptop. This was not like the main thing I was doing at my desk all day. I was trying to do it as I was moving around. And by using Claude Code for web, I was able to like do it on like an Uber ride home, or I was able to do it like when I was kind of sitting on the couch or like between meetings, which is really nice. And then I use Runway for the video generation and for the assets. And then for the audio, I was using ElevenLabs. And so there were two types of audio that I was generating. One was the narration across the entire storyline. And then I was listening to it. I was like, something's missing. And I was like, oh, it needs a score. It needs music in the background. And so luckily ElevenLabs also has a score. But because Fable has a full understanding of the flow of the narration, the story, the timing, how everything's being stitched together, it was able to build like this like emotional peaks and valleys that kind of go along with the story of the video. And I'm just like vibing, right? Like I'm just like prompting into Claude Code, and it's ripping these incredible videos. And then at the very end, Fable is going to stitch everything together. So it doesn't actually use any Gen UI or Gen AI for a lot of the text on the videos. It'll then use a combination of Remotion, which is like a React native tool to be able to add in actual text content. And then it'll also use like FFmpeg. I wasn't even familiar with that, to be able to start editing and stitching all this stuff together. And I like spent a couple of days on it, and then I was like, oh, we have this skill library, and it made this really amazing video. Like, oh, we have an agent framework. Oh, we're rolling out functions to have deterministic code that can be registered like a serverless function from AI, but don't share it as like a .py file in a skill. Like register it as a function and run it in the cloud, but have it be shareable in the same way that a Python function might be when you're sharing it in a skill. We have observability, which we've talked a lot about on the show. And then we're rolling out like this. We do training. We've always been doing training. So just put a name on it, call it Hedgineer Academy. So all of our clients just get training as well. We put a brand and reusable content. And then also like, what is Hedgineer, and describing that, where we have both software and services, customize the software for our clients. They own all the skills, all the agents that we build, and we're able to reuse how we share skills, how we use observability, how we manage agents over and over. And it's this really symbiotic relationship between services and software, which I think makes us really special and unique. And so being able to articulate that to Claude, and have Claude then give me back this incredibly, what I find beautiful and romantic and playful and insightful piece of video content with such little friction on my end to be able to produce it, was amazing. And it made me, and we've had a lot of discussion since then, because at first it was like, I can't be the only one that can do this. And so then I set up the library. I'm like, Jhanvi, do a Git clone of this repo and start creating your own kind of videos on top of it, using basically the skills and the libraries and the framework that we set up. And you were able to start ripping video content really well, where your Claude session is using the same underlying models going through runway.dev. You're using ElevenLabs for narration and score.
Yeah, like we're playing around,
it was awesome.
We're playing around with this idea of having like complementary / different campaigns. Like the video that we just rolled is very narrative, very engaging, and it's very insightful in explaining the value prop of this. But at the same time, it's also helpful to have another video that's a little bit more product focused, where you can actually see snippets of the product, understand how it actually works. And so that's what I was working on, where like I used the same tools and technologies that you outlined, and then built a completely different video in a different style. And we're still iterating on that. But I think it'll be a pretty interesting campaign if we can fuse those two, where we have like a video about the skill library in this very narrative, whimsical theme. And then we, a couple days later, post a more traditional quote unquote marketing campaign video, which is like, this is the product, this is what it looks like, this is how you share with other people, this is what you can do with it. And then maybe we alternate back and forth. Maybe we do all at once and then we do all at once. Like we're still figuring that stuff out. But it's like so empowering and interesting and cool because this is something that like I don't think I would ever log myself as a creative, but like I do have ideas and I've never been able to take an idea and build video content in this way before.
Yeah.
So it's been kind of interesting.
We then took it we then like started experimenting with it where we connected it to our MCP servers that we have in the Hedgineer platform that describe usage of how a user is using AI. And we had it generate a matrix themed video that described Lucian on our team's AI usage for one day and had it treat each task that he was working on as though it was like a boss or a villain within the matrix, where it could be like one of the agents or not the oracles weren't the bad guys, but I forget what they are, like the ones with the dreads. And it generated this like very detailed, highly technical overview of how he was using AI across Cursor and Claude Code and what skills he used, what were the problems he was solving, like what tickets they were associated with. And it was pretty incredible. And it was insightful, right? Like it was also suggestions of what he could have done better with AI using the same data that we have in observability in the same way that we then use that to craft user-driven or like user-specific training on how they can use AI better, but doing it through a medium not of email or not of a dashboard, but doing it through the medium of video content in short form.
Yeah.
Was awesome. Like when you were watching it, like I don't want to say you had tears in your eyes.
I did. I thought it was hilarious. It was very funny. I don't know if the AI was intending for it to be funny, but it was just very funny. And like, it's like context is context is context. And we've spent so much time and effort and money like building out this paradigm of like what good corporate context should be. And we practice what we preach. So we just have so much data around how people are using AI. We have a lot of content from like training sessions and we're merging them into this concept called Hedgineer Academy. There is so much content on what you're doing with AI, how you should be using AI, what access you have to all the various external data sources that we've connected you with through MCP. And like the same way that we're able to help people build better skills or help people build better agents or help people build better automations, like you can also start building video content in that way. And like that was incredibly insightful. And we're still trying to figure out what that means and what we want to do with it. But it opened up a really interesting discussion within the office because we were like, videos have not permeated lots of different parts of corporate America. But that's usually just a function of the fact that it's pretty expensive to make and there's only a handful of people that can do it relative to the entire organization. What does it look like when that's changed?
Yeah. And I think it's going to be, if you want my opinion, I think it's going to be pretty significant where you're always like a large part of any organization is communication and transfer of information from one person to another, from one person to many, oftentimes from many people to one. Mm-hmm. And the way that information gets consumed and the medium in which it's delivered has an impact on how well that information gets synthesized. And people I do like having information if it's available to me in video format so I can consume, but not in a way that requires me to be like fully engaged, in a way that if I'm reading a well-written document, I have to be a little bit more, I think, turned on sometimes and plugged in. And that can be exhausting. So having content that's meant to be insightful and easily consumable, but not something that you need to be like 100% completely focused on, video plays an awesome role. So like training or advice or like, hey, this is like a reminder, like what you need to be doing today, or like your 10 biggest tasks, like FYI, or hey, I know you have something going on. I'm going to do a quick brief for the meeting that you have coming up in like a 30-second video with like some high-level check boxes. So you can really quickly add visuals as well within video content. So like, it's not the way that you're going to like read hard. You're going to be consuming hard, thoughtful information that requires you to grind through it and really synthesize. But when it's just something that you need to understand, action on, and then to some extent forget about, I think that's awesome for video. And it's going, I think we're like 3 to 6 months out from having this explosion of Gen AI video. Like, I think that there's probably been a lot of it so far, but how easy it was just this week, I think we're about to see like an absolute explosion. And there will eventually be some element of adverse reaction to it because it's going to get so prolific and it's going to get so abundant.
I mean, there was a very distinct adverse reaction with OpenAI Sora, and they killed it. Like, Gen AI video, I think, became more popular in the consumer level, excluding industries and professions that are very video oriented. Like, yes, obviously people are using video Gen AI, like if that's their job and their profession. But like, I think when it comes to like businesses like ours and enterprises like hedge funds, asset managers, where like video is not traditionally a part of your job, like, I don't think that anyone's really actively made it. So,
yeah, but it will be like, for example, IR, like if you are fundraising, having an emotionally triggering presentation of who you are as a fund, what makes you special, people can emotionally connect, but it also articulates your track record and experience in your team. People do generate a lot of content. And you look at the number of funds that are pushing out podcasts right now. Like, there's a new fund popping up every day, and like the marketing arm of funds are getting more and more sophisticated. And so the role of multimedia content is only going to increase, at least from their perspective of marketing.
I agree with that. I think the hardest part about this for me is like decoupling my own personal opinions and then what I think will end up being the most successful for us as a company. Because like, I'm not a video person. Like, I don't go on YouTube. I don't really like watching videos. I don't really like being around a screen when I'm not working. I am more of an audio person, so I like listening to content and I like reading content. And like, I've always been that way. I think so for me, like when we were talking about this in the office with other people on the team, I was just like, I would never, if I were an investor and someone on an IR team for a fund showed me a video, I would be like, the hell is this? Like, this is like, there's something about video that I don't take seriously, if that makes sense. And I think that this industry is traditional and old school in a lot of ways. And I think that change is very slow. It's like, like lava slowly trickling down a volcano. Like, change is just very slow in finance. But on the flip side, I also think that there's lots of evidence that suggests that younger people that have been raised with the internet have shorter attention spans, are more, they resonate more deeply with video content as a function of how social media has kind of shifted more towards like Instagram Reels and TikTok and like all that stuff. And so I do think that with time and also with like a new generation of people flooding these industries, like I do think that you're right.
Yeah.
I don't like it, but I think that you're right.
Yeah. And I think it also plays a big role for some of the very larger funds in recruiting.
Yeah.
Where if you look at Citadel, for example, the majority of their video content is all on software engineers and the technologists that they're looking to hire. Because I think that you can, if you're a great PM, like they pay the best. Generally speaking, they can get the pick of the litter. On the technology side, it's not as obvious that Citadel is a career path that you would want to take. And so there needs to be some element of convincing. So there's been a huge investment in their marketing side. Go to their Instagram, like go to their their TikTok. I don't know if they have a TikTok, but I'm sure that they do. But if you go to their Instagram or YouTube, there's tons of videos on like, hey, this is my experience as an intern. This is my experience as like a software engineer 2 years out. And really selling that story. I do think it resonates really well.
That's sales and marketing. Video has always had a place in sales and marketing because social media is a thing. So I agree with that. But that, in my mind, is very different than building videos to distribute to investors if in an IR division.
But I see that as, that's sales and marketing too. And
that's true.
And it doesn't have to be sales and marketing like, hey, take a look at this video we just put together. It's more of, this video's out there and it's associated to, let's say, robotics in terms of like where it shows up in people's feeds. And so if somebody's looking into deep robotics, like electronics and like AI within robotics, and then up pops a VC fund that specializes within deep tech robotics, that the person that's watching it, I don't know, 1% chance that they might actually be a potential engineer they want to hire, or somebody that might be an LP in that space, or somebody that they might want to hire for a role as an investor on their team or an analyst. And so I think you can use still video and not market directly at like raising capital, but putting your content where your customers are, or potential, in this case, LPs are, and having them like kind of self-discover, like, oh, wow, this fund's prolific. They even are advertising and have this content on this small biotech subreddit, and it's showing up. That's pretty cool. And so I think there's like this very subtle psychology to it.
I like one of the things that we were talking about with the team earlier in the week was off the back of the Matrix video that was more of a POC jokey thing. We're obviously not going to start sharing that with our clients, but we were talking about like we deliver very curated user-based insights on how individuals can get better at AI in the form of emails. Like we have all of the data of all of the ways that you're using AI. We have a team of people that know what good practices are. And then we have LLMs that are actually reading through all of this and propagating up insights. And at the end of the day, someone on our team actually kind of proofreads that, and it gets auto sent out to every person that uses their software. Of like, here's a summary of the things that you've been using AI for the past 2 weeks. Based on like what we know as like best practices, like these are some tips and tricks that you can use to get better at the thing that you're already doing. And that has started to resonate a lot with people. I think that it's differentiated us in the market very significantly. And the question was, is email the best way to actually convey this information? Or would it be more engaging, more interesting, more frictionless of an experience if we started sending out very custom videos to people? Because now we know that we can do that. And I was more on the camp of no, you were more in the camp of yes, for reasons that we've already kind of discussed. But like, I guess maybe is my answer. Like, I just think that it's so different when I see a promo video on Instagram about a company that's hiring engineers, because like I'm in the mindset of I'm here to watch content. I'm here to watch engaging, interesting content. I'm not plugged into work in the same way. And I think that LinkedIn has kind of drifted towards that as well. Like, yes, it is a professional social media, but like I don't go on LinkedIn in work mode. I go on work like LinkedIn in personal mode. And so the kind of content that I'm receptive to and resonates with me is very different. When I'm at work and I'm watching a video, I'm reminded of like bullshit compliance training videos, or like anti-phishing videos, or like those types of things that people would make me watch my old job and that everyone has to do. Like that's what videos remind me of, like homework / like meaningless, tedious work that's very like bureaucratic. Like that's the content. That's the context in which I've been watching videos at work for as long as I've been working.
Yeah.
You know? So I just have a very adverse reaction to like someone giving me a video and be like, hey, this is how you can get better. Cause I'm like, I don't want that.
Yeah.
You know?
But is that seems to me more of a Pavlov's dog effect, where it's not necessarily the bell that you don't like, but it's what you associate the bell with.
Yeah. Maybe.
Yeah. And I find videos that are very well articulated to be refreshing, because like so much of your day, you're reading through dense emails or contracts or code, and being able to turn off like some element of your mind and have the content be kind of like fed to you in an easy to consume way allows you to like sit back, relax. And it's just that you never, that content in a professional setting was never high quality.
Yeah. But that's the key, right? You were like, the content needs to be good.
Yes.
And I was going to ask you, like, what was the most difficult part of this video content creation cycle? The answer for me was like actually making it good. Like it came out with something that was really strong from like a foundational level, but there were so many like small nits here and there that we had to very intentionally sift through, think through, write down, pass in as follow-up prompts to continue iterating, getting this to a good state. Like I think that incorporating our sense of taste was the hardest part of this process.
Yeah. I would say the 100% is the taste and making sure the content itself is good. Because if you lean too much on Gen AI to produce the content and the narrative that it goes on a random walk, which is not what you were intending to convey. And so you have to control the content and the narrative, for sure. Another element that can be tricky is that sometimes it does something and you're like, oh, that's interesting. Is that good or not? And then it does it again, and then it does it again. And you get to a point with...
What's an example?
Like, oh, it creates a picture of an AI jumping over a moon to indicate that it gets out of control. And then like the next slide, it might say like, oh, in order to create a concept of like, it doesn't have access to data, like it tries to run into a door and can't open it. It being like the same like character trying to open the door, representing the AI. And so like, oh, jumping over the moon, oh, running into this door and have it being locked. So each one might be like a good idea in isolation, but then when you kind of step back and you're like, hey, are these visual cues something that resonates in like a longer form timeline? I think that was, especially for somebody that hasn't done as much of that before, a little bit difficult. When in isolation it might be good, but in a longer narrative it's hard. And figuring out, how do I walk back all these decisions once it's in this kind of like well-connected format. Also, I think we don't do long form content in terms of like how we were doing the videos. Yeah, but this is human.
The longest form.
Yeah,
content.
well, I agree. So I think there's also, not to pivot, but I do think that there's something authentic about having completely non-AI generated content. So like, because like for better or worse, this is us. What you see is what you get. Like what we talk about on the podcast is what you get when you work with Hedgineer, and you either like it or you don't, but we can't fake it. Like we can't fake this show. Like we're human beings in a room with cameras, and the words we say out of our mouth and that somebody hears is directly connected. I'm not like some Gen UI face that's ultimately getting transformed to say something that I didn't intend to. And I think that authenticity is real, again, for better or worse, because we can't change who we are. But going back to that, what also didn't work well is micro edits. Like if you want to just like remove one small piece of like a UI or a Gen AI video, you kind of just have to let it go. Like don't be too much of a nitpicker. If some things, because we do a lot of animations, like we're not using like real cinematography and actual film in these videos. So when something kind of just disappears, it's like, oh, maybe that was intentional, it was an animation. But if it just kind of disappears in something that is like more cinematic and actual like live film, that would be more of an issue. But we get around that by not actually doing real, at least we haven't messed around with doing like real film yet.
Yeah, like hyper realistic stuff I'm sure would be somewhat frustrating, because if you see a very minute glitch, like micro editing that becomes difficult. I would imagine that if you were a professional video editor or a professional content creator in some way, shape, or form, I'd imagine the experience being mildly frustrating in comparison to us, where we're kind of looking at the macro. We also didn't come in with a very distinct vision. And so we're kind of seeing what Fable spits out. We're editing it in this very broad sense, in broad strokes, and we're getting something that we think is good because we're kind of iterating on it as we're going. If you have a very distinct vision of like, I want this frame, then I want this frame, then I cut to this, and you probably like outline that out, which is something that I tried to do with Fable yesterday, and I wasn't able to get really good results because there is a side effect to being too specific, because it tries its best to create a cohesive story, but it pays attention to your instructions more than its own like intuition and reasoning.
Yeah.
So like the first version of the video that I built was like not great at all. And then I kind of had to iterate on it.
So yeah, I think we should include as many of the videos as we have in the show notes. If anyone wants to take a look at them, I encourage them to. Like we can even like start sharing some of the code that we use to be able to produce this. And yeah, we'd love to see what the audience thinks. And with that, I want to thank everyone for tuning in for another episode of the Hedgineer podcast, talking about technology, data, and AI, and asset managers and hedge funds. Although this time we went a little bit off course and just talked about generating videos. But other than that, we try to stay on topic. So you can follow us on Instagram, LinkedIn, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, you name it, we're there. And until next episode, see you later.
The Hedgineer podcast releases episodes weekly on Tuesday. Our hosts are Michael Watson and Jhanvi. The Hedgineer podcast is produced and edited by Aaron Free. Follow us on your social platform of choice and reach out to us at podcast@hedgineer.io.